Oh, really close. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm from Saros Consulting, and we're going to talk about the importance of IT planning in construction, about getting IT involved early. So, let's just move on here. My name's Justin Van der Spey, from South Africa. You can all give me a slagging about the rugby later. So what Saros does is we're an independent IT consultancy. So we work with companies around their strategies and solutions, helping companies independently analyze what they have and help them get to where they're going. So when it comes to construction projects and things like that, we will do the project and vendor management on behalf of the client, but in terms of just the IT. And we're also vendor and technology agnostic. So if you have a preference for vendors or preference of types of technologies, as long as it fits what you're trying to do, we'll help you implement that. We also have extensive international experience in the construction industry, project managing office builds and upgrades. So the way we approach everything, not just construction projects, but any projects, whether it be software, hardware, is we work with this pyramid. Essentially, everything is down to a company strategy. What is it the company trying to achieve? And then we work with the company to work out how do we get to the infrastructure? What sort of infrastructure is required to get us to the strategy that you're trying to reach? So we'll make sure that your infrastructure supports whatever applications you're trying to run, because the world runs with applications. And then once you've got those applications in, you need to have a way of governing those applications and managing and making sure that they're doing what you want them to do. And ultimately, that'll get you to your strategy. So, historically, when we look at IT in construction, it hasn't really had much of a part. The world of M&E has always been involved, but IT, we've always seen as the guys putting the switches in, the servers, the routers, the Wi-Fi, all that stuff was always seen as external to an office building, something we put in right at the edge. Your M&E guys, they used to deal with what they still do, the cabling, the monitoring, the building of data centers, the patch rooms, your cooling requirements, your security, your power and your fire suppression. But what's happened recently in the last few years is IT and M&E have become merged, have become intertwined. Now, it's not to say that IT is now running these systems or implementing these systems. M&E are still very much the people that do these things, but there's now a requirement from IT to link them together. So when it comes to your cabling systems, M&E and IT have to be talking to each other. Your monitoring systems, we're talking about data center monitoring. Your traditional DNS systems didn't really worry about data center monitoring, the heating and the cooling. If you look at the data centers and patch rooms themselves, they were kind of just built and IT just had to put their equipment into it. Now there's requirements coming out of that. IT now has requirements around, well, we need a certain amount of space, we need a certain amount of power, we need to be able to support these kinds of systems. So that link is so strong, especially if you look at cooling. In the old days, you just stuck a cooling unit on the wall and it started dripping liquid, well, you just stuck a tray there and you hoped it didn't go onto the equipment. That's kind of how it used to work, and the security systems weren't linked to anything. It was kind of a guy at the front desk and he'd let you in and out of the building. So very much the power is driven by IT. The biggest consumer of power in any office is IT. So if you can plan for your IT early enough, you can tell M&E, these are our power requirements. So if you don't plan for M&E, you can run into a lot of issues as well. So generally, when we talk about planning, there are typically three types of scenarios. Either you've got a landlord that has a building. He has yet to find any tenants, but he's going to build that building, and your IT requirements are very, very woolly at that point. They don't really plan too far ahead, but there are things that you can plan for when you're building just a shove and core type environment. If there's already a single tenant, like an Essentia that's going to take an entire building, then the client requirements become paramount. You can talk to them early, you can design and build based on the client requirements. Often what happens though is you get a multi-tenant type environment, the office gets built, there's multiple floors, tenants on this floor and that floor, and again that brings its own type of IT requirements, because every client is then trying to run their own section of a building, not trying to run the entire building. So It really depends on what the purpose of the office is. If it's a sales type environment, that is one bums on seats, telephones at desks, and very little data. But you might get something like the oil industry or the architecture environment, where you have big data requirements, and you really have to plan for these things. So when you design your IT infrastructure, we go back to the pyramid, it's all about meeting the client's strategy, the client's IT requirements right at the beginning. And typically what's happened in the past is that M&E considerations were taken into account with the architects. Now, M&E guys would generally say, well, I want a football park-sized thing, and I can just stick all my equipment in there. But the same way that M&E are taken into account, IT should also be taken into account, because this is what now powers offices. So, just to give you a bit of a flavor for the things we've come across in the past, this is just a subsection of the types of issues that we've had when we've walked into buildings and IT hasn't been planned for, and a lot of remediation work is required. Data centers, if you build a data center that's too small, IT is not going to be able to work with that. What you're going to have to do then is you're going to have to end up extending that data center, building a second data center, which requires a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money. The same with patch rooms. In the past, the considerations like in a large environment like this, we've seen it before, you just want the patch room out of the way. So you stick it in the far corner, and then you realize that the clients in the far end of the building aren't getting their data, because you're running into Ethernet problems with 100-meter distances. You're just losing power when you get to the end of the building. So you really need to work out where everybody's sitting and where the patch room should be going. And one of the big problems as well is cable runs. So in an environment like this as well, we've come across it where you want to run a cable from there to there. You don't want to run it across the ceiling. You want to run it on the floor. The floor's already cast in concrete. No one planned ahead for that. So what you have to do is you have to spend extra money now trying to design either a raised floor or come up with a plan of how to run cables across the top of the roof and then drop them down to where the clients are. So another big one is water pipes. I was working on a project where the data center was on the top floor, and the water that was collecting on the roof was dropping down into the building via a water pipe and then getting sent out. The problem was that because IT designs weren't taken into consideration, is that the water pipe basically dropped down in the center of the data center. Now, the data center couldn't be moved for many other reasons other than, or including that was the only space left in the building. So, at great cost, they had to move the water pipe and the collection point in the roof. So that's not a cheap job. It takes a lot of money to do that sort of thing. And then, of course, the roof is compromised, so you never know if it's maybe we need some of the nanotechnology spray. But you can never be sure that it will hold water properly again. And again, when it comes down to UPSs and generators, if you buy the wrong UPS and generator at the start, and it's not going to fulfill IT requirements, you're going to have to buy a new one. You're going to have to buy a second one. You're going to have to spend a lot of money on things that you didn't think about. And another big one, I mentioned it earlier, is the cooling. If you start putting traditional cooling units into a data center, you're going to get condensation problems. You're going to get water dripping into your data center. And generally, the way that things run now is that power and data is running to the floor. So that's the first place it's going to get hit. And that runs your entire environment. So if you start getting wet cables, you're not going to be able to run your data centers or your office at all. And something that I have put last, but it probably shouldn't be last, is lift access. We've walked into countless high-rise buildings where there's no service lift. They've put in standard lifts all over, and the IT equipment just will not fit in there. You look at storage. If you buy storage from EMC or NetApps or someone like that, they're selling you an entire rack full of storage. Now, what we've had to do in the past is actually break it up and pull it completely apart. And then that way you can get your equipment in, but you shouldn't have to do that. So at the beginning, if you can plan for the lift access, you won't have, what's also happened is having people carrying things upstairs, breaking their backs trying to get IT equipment into the building. So, as I was saying, the cost savings are immense. If you can plan for IT up front, it doesn't cost nearly as much to plan for your IT up front as it does to remediate an issue. The costs can be phenomenal, and also the amount of time you're paying guys to build a building, not to go back and redo things, rip down walls, put up the same wall, same walls somewhere else. Put new systems in. It's a time-consuming process, and it can cause delays on your office builds as well. And at the end of the day, if you have to put less effort in, you're making more money, and you're completing projects more quickly, and then you get satisfied clients. And you then build that reputation of trust, is that you guys have everything in hand when you're building your offices. So, in summary, planning for your IT will save you time, it will save you cost, and it will save you effort. What Saros Consulting do within that is we work with the clients, whether that be the end user or it could be the landlord or the tenants, to understand what they're trying to do with their IT. And then we'll design and plan the IT solution, working with the architects, working with M&E to make sure that it all fits within the environment, and we'll then project manage the implementation. So at the end of the day, we make the complex simple. So that is about all I have for you. These are the details.